Welcome back to Ask the Trade Pros, a show where a couple of trade guys talk about trade stuff. We're here to answer all your questions about your HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and your other home systems so you can keep your home running smoothly. I'm Todd.
And I'm Jordan.
Recently, we did an episode on testing your water for contaminants. Did you know one of the reasons for contaminated drinking water is plumbing backflow? Backflow happens when your plumbing system reverses flow, which pulls contaminants and pollutants into your clean water supply.
Plumbing backflow can be a big problem to deal with, and it can cause health issues for anyone who drinks the backflow water. So let's go over why backflow happens and how to prevent it from happening in your plumbing. First, Todd, how does backflow occur?
Well, first, I guess there's two different types of backflow. So back pressure or back siphonage. Back pressure occurs when the pressure in the downstream system exceeds the source of the water supply.
So the downstream device, Todd, would be the house from the main water supply or your pool from your house. It's the farthest, it's where the water's coming out, the last line of where the water goes to, correct?
Yeah, so back pressure can occur if you have a lot of multifamily or even some people with well systems. You have a pump involved, right? So it can exceed the incoming water pressure. So your incoming water's pressure is 60, 80, whatever that pressure is, but you have a pump that's capable of pumping higher. So if your downstream water has a higher pressure than your incoming, you're forcing water back towards the city or the
Municipal supply.
Yeah, it can happen with thermal expansion, etc.
So explain that a little bit on thermal expansion. I know we talk about that all the time as plumbers, but explain to people what causes their thermal expansion.
So thermal expansion is when, well, we'll take a hot water heater, for example.
Tank water heater.
Yeah, a tank water heater. So you're heating up a tank of water, and what happens when you heat water?
It expands.
It expands. So hence thermal expansion. Now you have a tank, typically on a tank water heater, that's called a thermal expansion tank. So that acts as a buffer for when that expansion does happen instead of bursting a tank or rupturing, etc.
Keeps that pressure even. And then what you said, there's another kind of backflow. What is that called?
So the other type of backflow is back siphonage. Back siphonage is when there's a drop in the pressure of your supply line, such as your main water line break or something along that nature. And that creates a vacuum and pulls water back into your city water supply.
And water's water. Why would somebody care if the water entered back into the system?
A lot of reasons. Contaminants. Chlorine, a good example is a pool. So if a lot of times people's automatic pool fill valves fail and they just hook up their garden hose and throw their garden hose in the pool and start filling the water. Well, if that garden hose, if the end of the garden hose is at the bottom of the swimming pool and you have a water main break out at the street, it's going to start pulling that chlorinated water back through all of the plumbing system. So through your house, all the way back down into the street, and it's going to start leaking out there.
Well, chlorine's just flavor, isn't it?
Yeah. Everyone likes drinking chlorinated water.
A little bleach in your water? What has that ever done, right?
Yeah, so that's what it is. Nobody wants to be drinking, and you think of it this way, there's a lot of industrial plants or places that deal with deadly chemicals that you have to
Restaurants even, mold, fungus,
yeah,
bacteria, unclean kitchens, all that kind of stuff can go back.
So those are the two types of backflow. So now we'll talk about backflow protection and different types of devices and how to prevent that. What do you got, Jordan?
Well, the first type of device that it's mandatory on every commercial building, does appear on some residentials, but not as common, would be a backflow preventer device. And that's literally a check valve, a sort of stopgap that the water can only flow one direction. So the water can come out of the supply, but it cannot return. It's essentially like a gate in there, a pressurized gate, and as the water pushes on it, it opens, and when it comes back, it closes. Now this, like as we said, is required on every commercial building, but some residentials have it, some do not. So that would be the first device for backflow prevention, would be an actual backflow preventer device.
Yeah, so Jordan mentioned a check valve. So there's a few different backflow protection devices, and they all do stuff different. Some prevent from back siphonage only, some prevent for back pressure only. So you have the double check valve, you have a RP, you have a SVB, which is a spill vacuum breaker. The RP, or reduced pressure, is the most common one that you'll come across, and that prevents from both back pressure and back siphonage. So when you're out testing or coming across these commercial properties, more than likely that's what you're going to see is what we call a RP, or a reduced pressure assembly. Most common that you could do to prevent at your house or something like that, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, Jordan did, is the air gap. So an air gap is just a break in the line that it's
a
not
hole.
It's a
Just
hole.
space.
It's a space, an air gap that has air in between that you're just dumping. So
Like if you're filling your pool up, you don't throw the hose into the water. You have the hose hanging above the water. And that's an air gap. It's a simple air gap.
Yep, exactly that.
You'll see it in a lot of your devices in your house. A sink is an air gap. People don't realize that. The faucet doesn't go directly into the drain. There's a foot between the sink and there's a certain requirement. That's an air gap. It's why you don't have your water connected directly to your drains. Happens in washing machines. You'll see it with the drainage. You'll see the drain hose spaced above the drain hole to give it an air gap. Anything basically to keep bacteria or contaminants from jumping from one pipe to the other.
Exactly. And on garden hose, we talked about the pool instance.
Well, it doesn't count if you're drinking from the garden hose, Todd. That's not an air gap.
Well, I'm just talking about devices to prevent. So you have a anti-siphon device that you can put on your hose bib that's not going to allow it. So you don't have the need or to install a whole backflow assembly on your main line coming in. You could just do that as a
For
spot
anyone that
protection.
doesn't know what that is, that's that annoying device that half the people hate. When you shut your hose off, it spits water all over your feet, all over the place. When you turn it off, it looks like it's leaking and broken. It's actually intentionally doing that.
Yeah, preventing back siphonage.
Yeah, and just spits water up. But that's a simple backflow device. Now, one of the other devices we haven't talked about, they go on your hot water heaters, is an expansion tank. Todd mentioned a little bit about it earlier. And depending on whether you have a tank or tankless water heater, they're going to be slightly different devices because the tankless water heater doesn't hold a lot of water, so it doesn't need the same kind of device. But on a tank water heater, it's usually going to be the size of a small barrel, 2 gallons or whatever size it comes on. And it's just a tank. And what it does is as the water heats up from the water heater, that backs into the water line and causes hot water has a higher pressure than cold water. As it gets warm, it expands, therefore it increases the pressure. The expansion tank is a surplus area where that water can expand into to keep it from creating back pressure and then flowing back into your lines. We see that a lot on every commercial site. Again, that's required on a water heater. It should be on your residential water heaters. We don't see it all the time, but it's a recommended addition to your water heater to prevent that. Sometimes backflow can still happen despite our best efforts to prevent it. Backflow prevention? That's a good joke. If you suspect you may have a backflow issue, or if you want to get an existing issue taken care of, contact your local trusted trade pro as soon as possible.
Thank you for listening to Ask the Trade Pros. We release new episodes every other Tuesday, so be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a question you would like us to answer on the show, please leave us a voicemail or an email, and we may feature your question in an upcoming episode. That information is in the show notes. This podcast is sponsored by the good folks at Done Right Services. As always, thank you for your support.